Hi, my name is Lolly Garcia-Tor. I'm a partner in the Newark, New Jersey office of K&L Gates and a member of the firm-wide diversity committee. Today, in our 11th Conversations About Race, and as part of our continued celebration of Pride Month and on the heels of National Hispanic Heritage Month, I'm delighted and honored to introduce Justice Mary Yu to the K&L Gates community. We started Conversations About Race over 2 years ago as part of our effort to address the effects of inequality and systemic racism in our society. Thousands of people from within and outside of the firm, including our clients, have listened and learned from our incredible guest speakers, making this series the most well-attended online event the firm has ever held. It is only one of several firm-wide initiatives focused on promoting equality and justice. We have launched K&L Gates for Equal Justice, the pro bono component of our initiative. We've created an educational toolkit that contains a collection of resources to help individuals learn about the complex subject of racism. We've implemented bias training to address unconscious bias, interviewer bias, and creating an inclusive culture. We have initiatives focused on developing and training diverse talent, as well as programs to ensure that our recruiting practices reflect our commitment to equality, diversity, and inclusion. These and the numerous other firm-wide and local programs throughout the firm are the result of K&L Gates' commitment to diversity and inclusion and ensuring that diversity and inclusion are a core value reflected in what we do on a daily basis. As part of that commitment, we are honored to have Justice Yu speak with us today. Justice Yu is the first Asian, Latina, and out member of the LGBTQ plus community to serve on the Washington State Supreme Court. Justice Yu was appointed to the Washington Supreme Court in 2014 and has subsequently been elected and re-elected to the Supreme Court, and she is running unopposed on the ballot for 2022. Justice Yu joined the Supreme Court after more than 14 years as an accomplished trial judge in King County Superior Court. And as a judge, she presided over civil, criminal, and family matters, officiating hundreds of weddings and handling hundreds of adoptions, including the adoptions for some of those at K&L Gates. Justice Yu is regularly and frequently honored for her contributions to the law and the betterment of society. I wanted to read all of the honors and awards that Justice Yu has earned over the years, but then we'd be sitting here listening to me read from a very long list for the next hour. So without any more ado, I turn over the discussion to Carley Andrews, partner from our Seattle office, who will be facilitating the conversation with Justice Yu. Justice Yu, thank you so much for joining us today. Now I'll turn it over to Carley.
Hello, Your Honor, and it is a pleasure to welcome you to speak with us today.
Carley, thank you so much.
As Lolly mentioned, you were a trial court judge for 14 years, and in 2014, you were appointed as a justice to the Washington State Supreme Court, and since then, you've won re-election several times. And I have read that you were raised by a working class immigrant family, and that you were the first in your family to graduate from college, which I can relate to as a first-generation college graduate. And then on top of those achievements, you are a revolutionary first Asian, Latina, and LGBTQ justice on the state Supreme Court. And so I am wondering if you can tell us a little bit about your background and how your upbringing as a child of immigrant parents has impacted your journey.
Gosh, thank you, Carley, again for, first of all, the invitation, but for that question. You know, it's so interesting because growing up in the inner city on the south side of Chicago to immigrant parents, I can say for certain that the vision and the dream of being a lawyer, much less a judge, was never there, never on the horizon, never talked about, and we never knew anyone professionally. And so when I think about that experience and where I am now, I suppose the lessons learned are, right, is dare to dream big at some point. I didn't even think about going to college until I was in high school. So when I look back and what do I take from that experience, I think the experiences really require that each one of us who comes from that kind of background take a risk. Right? Take a risk to step outside of what is known. Take a risk outside of our community that seems safe. And for me, that might be really the lesson learned at the end of the day. Of course, I have burned in my memory the stories that my mother shared about being a farm worker and the stories that my father shared about working in a factory all of his life. And does that color the values that I have today? Absolutely. I care very much about the little guy. I care very much about the opportunity for everyone to participate in this democracy. And where does that come from? I think it comes from that experience.
Thank you. And also, in preparation for this discussion, I have watched some video of you speaking at a symposium where you spoke a bit about your multiracial background as both a Latina and a Chinese woman, and how cultural expectations affected you growing up or may have impacted you and that you faced. And also, given that your achievement as an elected official still remains pretty singular and unique, could you tell us a bit about how those cultural expectations shaped your journey?
You know, the cultural expectations, now I just want to add a little caveat, is I'm a lot older than people think. So there's the whole gender overlay in terms of not only culture, ethnicity, race, but the expectations of a female when I was growing up, right? The expectations, frankly, from my family were you're going to get married, you're going to have a family, and everybody's going to live together, and that's the end of the story. And so culturally, the overlay on that was certainly from the Chinese or Asian perspective was we're supposed to be intelligent, good students, but a girl was not expected to be an advocate on her own behalf orally anywhere in the family and in school. The expectation was just sit back, and there really isn't a need to be loud, be visible, or be present in any way. And it just so happened, I think probably the influence of my mother made me a little bit more sassy and pushing back and demanding in some ways. And it allowed me to develop, frankly, the skills of being an oral advocate for myself. That served me much later in terms of not being afraid to speak up in court, not being afraid to speak up in an arena in which right, the message isn't going to be received well. So when I look back at that, I think it served me well. But one's personality comes into play in everything that you do, and I think that little brassy pushback South Side kid was the one that moved me beyond the expectations, because the expectations were not much. And it's not that people didn't want me to succeed. It's just that the expectations of a girl in those days were not high.
And that's very interesting to hear kind of where you draw the inspiration to speak up and be who you are. But I'm guessing you did not have a lot of role models or mentors that were exactly like you growing up outside of your family. And what kind of role models or mentors did you have that inspired you to, go to law school, or develop in your professional career?
I went to a Catholic school all of my life. It was a commitment that my parents had made. And frankly, it was because my mother was a Catholic, my father was not. But in order to marry somebody who's Catholic in those days, you had to make the commitment to raise your children in a Catholic school. And so they did. And perhaps that was the beginning, really, of some role modeling, in the sense that the nuns or the sisters who were the only professional people in my life at that age were good people. And I knew at one level that they were doing good things, and I liked them and I wanted to be like them. But in terms of a real mentor, somebody who took interest in me and my development, that really didn't happen until high school, where this one teacher really came to me and just said, "Did you ever think about going to college?" And then she came home and talked my parents into letting me go to college, because that just wasn't on the scene and they didn't have the resources. So she helped me fill out the application. She helped me get to another place in my life. And then I would say the professors at the school at Dominican University were very helpful in trying to encourage me keep going. Even then, I would say the first real professional mentor was not until I had a job working for the bishop in Chicago in an office, the Office of Peace and Justice. It was an office where I first got the job as a secretary after college, and we set up an office to do some community organizing and good work. And he was the individual who really helped me develop a sense of myself. He would teach me how to give a speech, how to get up in front of an audience, how to engage people, how to really talk about power in our communities. And so that to me was the first professional mentor who said, look, in order to be successful, you need this set of skills. Later on, as a lawyer, there was a particular judge, Justice Bobby Bridge, who took an interest in me. My own employer, the King County prosecutor at the time, was Norm Mailing, who gave me legal work that was far more sophisticated than I was able to do. But he believed that if you throw somebody in the pool at the deep end, they're going to learn how to swim. And it was true. So those were people I could identify as specific mentors in my life who sponsored me and enabled me to really grow as a lawyer and as a person.
And in your professional career, either your legal or judicial career, can you tell us about one of a more challenging moment in your career and how you think your experience as a multiracial woman has influenced that, or how you responded to it?
Yeah, Carly, I would say probably the most significant moment in terms of really trying to make a decision where I say to myself, right, my race, my ethnicity, who I am really matters, was when I applied to the Supreme Court. And I was very happy being a Superior Court judge in King County. It's a diverse community. I had been there 14 years. I was very comfortable. I was in charge of everything. And it wasn't until a colleague of mine on the state Supreme Court called me and said, there's going to be a vacancy and you should apply. And I would have to say, for the first time professionally, I thought of what I could not do. And I said to myself, I can't win a statewide election because no woman of color has ever been elected in the state of Washington. I can't do that. It's an obstacle. It's a problem because I don't really believe that people in the state of Washington are ready to do this. And it was a showstopper for me. And it wasn't until I talked that through with my friend, who's Justice Gonzalez, that we had decided together the most important thing was that the governor have a diverse pool of applicants, right? I wasn't entitled to the position. There was no guarantee that I was going to get this spot. It was competitive. But what was really important was that there be a diverse pool of applicants. And I remember the moment that I made the decision to say, I'm never going to let my race, right, my sexual orientation in terms of who I am, get in the way of me moving forward. Whether I'm selected has nothing to do with me, but I could not disempower myself by not applying. And that was a pivotal moment for me. It was one that empowered me to say, right, we move forward, we take the risks, we do what we need to do to be visible and be present. And I would say that was one of the most significant moments in my life, one of the scariest, one of the riskiest in terms of leaving a job and moving forward and not really knowing whether I would be appointed or even whether I'd be elected. And everything changed since then. It was very empowering to make that decision.
And as you mentioned, you have been reelected and you're currently on the ballot unopposed. I mean, do you have thoughts about how you have connected with voters and what, if anything, is different in the world?
You know, I've made a point. This was a lesson that I learned by watching my mentor, the prosecutor who was a mentor. As he always said to me, when one wins an election, right, you get the day off the next day. But the day after is the beginning of your next election. And that is stay connected to the community. You don't just go out to the community when you want to be elected. Every single day is an opportunity to serve and to be present. So I'd have to say I have really always been present in every single way that I can. I accept a lot of speaking engagements. I go to schools to talk with young people. I believe that building, if you will, a community relationship means doing it every single day. So despite the fact that I could have always drawn a challenger, I felt very confident that I could go to any county in the state of Washington and find people that I knew and ask for their support. I think it's hard work, but I think it's paid off for me in terms of giving me a larger sense of who I'm serving and why I'm serving.
And one way that I know you've really impacted our community is that you've performed many, many marriages and adoptions, including for people that I know are part of our firm and our client community that are probably attending today. And one really stands out, happening a week when I was at home with a week-old baby, and that was when Washington State recognized marriage equality. And could you share a little bit about your experience officiating the first marriage of a same-sex couple in King County after marriage equality was recognized in Washington State?
Sure. I have to just say that I was very surprised that the initiative passed because I was pretty pessimistic, given that the other branches, including the Supreme Court, had failed to do the right thing in terms of recognizing our relationships and our desire to be wed to one another. And so I remember the evening when it passed, and I had a law clerk bailiff who was of Japanese descent, Japanese and white, who said to me, "Judge, this is so important that we should actually do a first same-sex marriage the moment the law comes into effect." And it comes into effect at midnight, right? On the particular night, December 9th. And he said, we should be the first. And he shared his own experience that his parents actually had to get married in another state because it was pre-loving, right? Their parents, his parents, could not be married because they were mixed race. And so we said, this is so important. And I got to admit, I thought, okay, let's do this. This is really important. And I had to convince our court to open up the courthouse at midnight. Easy. I had to convince the executive. Very easy. We had security, everyone volunteer. And I had decided, if we're going to do this, it's not the most important person who gets to do this at midnight, because it turned into a major press event. Whoever was the first to sign up was going to be, right, the couple that would be married in the state of Washington. And it happened to be that we got a call from two teachers. I had done their adoption previously of their little daughter. And they called and said, "Hey, we hear you're going to be doing this." And I said, "You want to be the first? Because you're the first to call." Two teachers from Mount Vernon came that night, and we decided we're going to do a wedding every half hour. And we literally started at midnight and went till 7 in the morning. It was remarkable in terms of, I have to admit, I'm even getting emotional talking about it right now, is the sense of power, the power of the law. And I had mixed feelings because I'm not convinced that civil rights ought to be up for a vote. And that at the same time, the people of Washington recognize that now was the time to say yes, yes to giving us full rights. And it was just a magical moment to be able to have the power to wed two people who just want to be committed to each other under the law. Remarkable. There's a little video out there about the weddings that night that you might be able to find because two women had captured it for public radio at the time. And it was just simply magical to hear the stories, how people had met, and what it meant to them to actually be legally married. I just can't say enough about how emotional it was and how empowering it was for those couples.
Yes, I think that empowerment I can definitely see. And aside from that first wedding that you officiated, people have reached out to me since this session was announced, letting me know that you performed their marriage or that you performed their second parent adoption, and seeing how that kind of empowers people in the community and enables them to, live authentically has been really amazing to see and experience as people reach out. Another thing I wanted to ask you about is you've been a justice of the Washington State Supreme Court since 2014. And before that, as we said, you were a trial court judge for 14 years. And you've co-chaired the Washington State Supreme Court's Minority and Justice Commission. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit about how that commission has impacted administration of justice in Washington State, and how, thinking about how the consideration of racial and other biases influences how justice is administered in our court system.
Yeah, the Minority and Justice Commission, for those who might not know, is a commission of the state Supreme Court that really is involved with the administrative side of the work that we do. And our Supreme Court has established 4 different commissions to take up work that we believe is important. For example, we have an interpreter commission, we have a gender and justice commission, and then we have minority and justice, and then we have one looking at child welfare in terms of foster care. So the Minority and Justice Commission, the purpose is to try to eradicate racism from our system of justice. And our primary focus has been education and research. Education in terms of recognizing that judges, right, need to be the ones who get this. Because if they don't understand how important it is to eradicate racism, it's never going to happen. I can't control any judge of the 400 or so in what they do and how they do it. What I can do is educate their awareness, how important it is to be respectful, how important it is for them to look at their own sentencing practices and ask some hard questions of themselves. So a lot of our time has been spent on education, and that is judges have mandatory CLEs as well. And so when we have judicial conference, we are the main sponsors of the educational sessions. We also have a judicial college, and we have a session that lasts a half a day that's just focused on raising their own awareness about race. We also have done a significant amount of research in areas that have impacted people of color the most. For example, legal financial obligations. I'm proud that our commission has been the leader in the state on documenting what's the impact of requiring people, first of all, to pay to play, if you will, to come into court. But second, sanctions that are imposed on people that really are a lifetime burden because they'll never pay it off. And so we've done a lot of research, we've done a lot of advocacy around those issues. Jury diversity is another one. So I would say we are probably the conscience maybe of the court that says, you want to be equal, you want to be fair, here's what you need to do. It's remarkable. It's made up of volunteers. Some are judges, some are people from the community. We're probably a little bit ahead of everybody else in terms of being a bit more radical and raising the questions. But I think it's important that the court have an entity that gets to challenge the court and others to do more and be better.
And related to challenging others to do more and be better, in June 2020, after George Floyd was murdered and other high-profile racial attacks on racial minorities occurred, the Washington State Supreme Court issued a letter, which we've circulated to participants in this session so that they can read it, to the judiciary and the legal community, recognizing injustices faced by Black Americans and challenging the legal community to act. And a quote I wanted to read from that letter says, "The legal community must recognize that we all bear responsibility for this ongoing injustice, and that we are capable of taking steps to address it if only we have the courage and the will." Can you talk about the court's process and decision to issue that letter, and what things we as individuals in the legal community as a whole needs to do to address racial injustice?
Yeah, thank you for asking about that. And we're now talking more publicly about the process. So there's nothing that is out of turn in terms of what I'm going to say. So at the time, the Chief Justice was Justice Deborah Stevens. She had gone to a conference of the Chief Justices and came back and talked about everybody being very concerned because courts now were the focus of protests. And part of it is people could see us and really believed in their heart of hearts that police, prosecutors, and the courts are all in cahoots with one another in terms of maintaining this system of justice that isn't fair. So we too became the targets of protests and people questioning what we were doing. And she came back and really invited a discussion among us to say, we need to do something, but I don't know what, and no other Chief Justice knows what to do. I was leaving that night and the chief came out. I rolled down my window of the car and, said, what are we going to do? Because we have to do something. And she just said, I know, and I don't know what. She said, I've been thinking maybe we should write something and perhaps issue a statement. And I said, Deborah, let me take a shot at this. It could be a letter to the legal community, and let me just take a shot at this, and let's see if we can come up with something and then convince the 9, if you will, the court, to support this. That night, I drafted what you have as the letter. There might have been a couple of changes, and then we presented it to the whole court. And I can say it was one of the greatest moments to have the court unanimously say, yes, we're going to issue this letter. We're going to do this. Now, the reason why I'm leading up to this is the first time that the Supreme Court has written a letter like this to the legal community. It's not something that we do, right? We talk through opinions. We don't issue press releases. We don't get up and have press conferences. And so this is the first time that we thought, let's really engage the legal community and the wider community, not just about diversity, right? About the value of Black lives, about recognizing that this is something very specific and something that we all need to correct to make ourselves better. It was unanimous, and I just have to say the feedback that we got was unbelievable in terms of judges saying to us, thank you. Thank you for giving us the freedom now to speak on this as well. We were afraid to talk about race. We're afraid to raise these issues. And the process was just that simple. Overnight, it had changed who we were and how we were going to be present in the community on this issue. And like your own firm, right, we have had people engage in study sessions for the last 2 years. People have been talking about this. Our administrative staff have been struggling with how we could do things better. We've had people really try to find ways to transform our system. Now, the criticism is that, wow, it's so slow and it's a long process. Well, yes, it is. But it's deliberate, it's intentional, it's institutional, and it's long lasting. And yes, it's going to take time. But it was a prophetic moment for our court. And I'd have to say the last, probably we've issued since that, maybe 25 decisions where we're talking about race. We're going to raise it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to challenge everybody to join us because that's the only way we're going to fix this whole system that we've created.
And in terms of ways that we can improve in the legal community, in preparing for this discussion, many people reached out and told me that you are a mentor to them, or that they consider you an inspiration in their work. And I know that many, if not most, of the people participating today are lawyers or legal professionals, in-house counsel, and others who care about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And, by virtue of being here today, I think indicating they are or they want to work on these issues. Do you have advice on how we in the legal community can provide good mentoring or work towards creating those more inclusive spaces, knowing that that's something that you kind of stand out for?
Yeah, it's almost twofold. I would say the most important thing that lawyers can do is really engage in self-education. I am surprised at how many people really are unfamiliar with the roots of slavery and racism in this country against Black people. And it's so important for people to really undergo a study and understand that because it begins to open up the package, if you will, of understanding how something could be institutional. It's not just habits, it's not just fear, it's not just level of comfort. It is really a systemic economic engine that devalue Black lives. And once you begin to understand that, you can then really transfer the knowledge to how do you create an environment, right, that's supportive. How do you not just mentor, but sponsor? How is it that you enable people to occupy the space, even if it makes you uncomfortable, recognizing they simply have the right to be here, to be successful? And then finally, for those who are more seasoned in the practice of law, right, how do you every single day find ways to transfer your knowledge, right? How to navigate a system that is really complicated. All of us are more familiar with those who are like us, right? And so it's a little uncomfortable sometimes to stretch out and say, I need to make sure that our legal environment, right, is a place that everybody feels comfortable. So how do we change what we do, right? Golf is not the way to create community anymore because not all of us play golf, or some of us do or not. But there's got to be other ways that we consciously create community, and then each one of us should try to sponsor somebody, right? To give people specific, concrete opportunities to succeed. I'm part of the Leadership Institute, which is a really a project, if you will, that is now 17 years old in the state of Washington that really works on leadership for underrepresented lawyers. And what we consciously do is to say, these are the rules that nobody's telling you about. This is how you behave. These are the expectations. But for us, this is how you be successful. This is how you find your own leadership abilities and then how you share that with the wider community. So that would be the challenge. I think each one of us in any legal environment you just have to wrestle with it. What are we doing to create an environment that's inclusive? And it doesn't mean creating a diversity committee and asking all the people of color to serve on it, right? All the allies ought to be the people who create the committee, serve on it, and find ways to be inclusive. Find ways to say, what are we doing and how can we do this better?
Yes, I think that's so important. Diversity, it seems trite or obvious to say, but diversity sometimes seen as the job of diverse individuals. And clearly, as someone who's LGBTQ, most of my mentors were not LGBTQ. And as you've mentioned, many of your mentors were not racial minorities or racially diverse. So we all really need to find ways to be allies and mentors to people who are maybe of different cultural backgrounds or racial backgrounds than us. And I think that can be a challenge for some people, maybe figuring out how to be an effective ally. Do you have any thoughts on that, on how, like, folks who do want to be allies, who do want to be mentors, but maybe are, not, they aren't the same racial background as folks they would mentor? Have there been ways that allies have done things more or less helpful that you've experienced or that you could share?
Yeah, I would say sometimes it's stepping back and asking yourself first, what is it that I have that I might share with others? Do I have power? Do I have access to specific clients? Do I have a network that really is pretty exclusive, but is a place where in order to be successful, you need to be there? And I think then that person, right, needs to be able to extend that to others. I would say when you start the conversation with, for example, I'll make this really simple. You want to do the right thing. There's a new person in your firm, or perhaps somebody who is fairly new in their practice area, who may be a person of color, right? The thing to do is to go into that person's office and say, how can I help you be successful? Is there anything that I can do to help you get to the next level in terms of where you want to be? But it's not to go into the office and say, how can I support you as a person of color? Or what do you need, right? Or what makes you different and how do we address it? I really think it's about a larger question of being successful, having access, and being frankly at ease with a person rather than always putting race right in the center. On the other hand, there are times when we have to do that, right? We have to have the hard conversations to say, you know what, doing this is really stupid and it doesn't work. And we have to be honest with each other to have that feedback, is to say that language doesn't work, or the way you treated me in this setting doesn't work. But we have to do that enough with, and this is going to sound corny, but we have to do it with enough love and affection for each other that we don't burn the bridges, right? That we have a relationship, that we're trying to nurture and do this together because we know together we're going to do it better. So a level of honesty, a level of compassion and forgiveness, and yet taking the risk and doing the right thing is so important. Creating that environment where everyone can succeed is what everybody really wants, including those of us who might come from a disadvantaged background. We just want access and a level playing field, to be treated equally like everyone else and being given a fair shot.
And in a sort of related vein, there's an idea of diversity fatigue and how there can be feelings of exhaustion and isolation about dealing with the complex issues around racial justice, and also as individuals facing racial injustice or LGBTQ discrimination. It can become exhausting. And knowing that we in the legal industry as a whole still struggle with improving diversity, how do we keep going and avoid that fatigue and feel like we are making progress?
Yeah, Carly, fatigue is very real, right? Burnout is very real. And We can learn the lessons from other areas, right? We take a little sabbatical, we take a little break, and we recharge and we re-energize. But I would say we never give up, right? This is too important. When I look at myself, yeah, I get exhausted at times being on for everybody all of the time, 7 days a week, because it isn't work for me. It is a mission and purpose. And I do try to give myself a break, but you know what? This is too darn important. I don't give up. I am tired, but you know what? I'm going to find that person who's going to replace me when I leave, and it ain't going to be right anything that I've given up. I wanted to be a woman of color. I wanted to be somebody who brings a voice maybe that wasn't there. And it's so important to keep moving forward. So yeah, taking a break, stepping back, re-energizing, being around people who are positive, who have ideas is so critical. And I would just say right now, more than ever, in the state of Washington at least, right, we need energy. We have momentum. It's a great state that really protects reproductive health and the right to privacy and really believes in the import of the trans community. And so there's energy and there's positive energy, and we just have to keep working towards that. Other people around the country have perhaps other issues and concerns, and I would say the time now is not to give up. Yeah, re-energize, recharge, find what gives you life, but please, the last thing that we can do is to say, I'm too tired. Well, you know, so sad, too bad. Until we have an inclusive community, this has to be our purpose. And as lawyers, I think we have a particular responsibility to sustain this democracy. The rule of law cannot die. The structure of what we have created for the last 200 years can't just be set aside. And I do believe that lawyers have a specific responsibility to sustain it. We don't have to be on the same political spectrum, but there are certain values and certain principles that I think are necessary to sustain who we are. And again, find time, find energy, but please do not give up. It's too important to do so.
You yourself have a very robust history of working towards justice and social justice. Where does that drive come from that has sustained you so long?
You know, this is going to sound again simple, and I apologize for making everything seem simple because it really isn't. And yet, what drives me is I often think about my parents and how hard they worked to provide an opportunity for my brother and I. I'll never forget, you know, my mother holding my hands in her hands and saying, I just want you to work in an office because I don't want your hands to look like mine, right? I worked in the fields and my hands were always dirty and they're calloused. My father, the same thing. His hands were very calloused. And for them, I have to admit, I feel tired. How tired were they when they were working hard? How hot was it in the fields when they were suffering? How hard it was for my father to be addressed as boy when he was a man. And so then to me, that charges me up is to say, Mary, you can't be tired. And this agenda is really important because until everybody can participate and everybody feels respected and the dignity of each person, right, is respected and enhanced, I don't want to give up. That is the vision. That is my purpose. That's why I'm here, is to make a difference. It sounds so corny, and yet I would say that's where I go when I go deep. I think, Mary, you can't be tired. You don't even know what tired is. You don't even know what exhausted is when you think about mom and dad and everything that they gave to you. And why? Because they believed that this country offered more. They really believed that their children would have an opportunity to do more, be more. And I feel a sense of duty and obligation to make that happen. That's where I get it. That's my energy. That's my passion. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
And that's a very impactful feeling. There's so much to live up to in the promise of, you know, our justice system and our democracy. And so we not to take away from all of the hard work that goes into sustaining those things. And as you said, there's a lot of complex work and issues facing us. Do you have anything that you'd like to share with us or the other participants on the call that we haven't touched on today?
No, I would say, Carly, if there's anything, I would really invite each of your lawyers to really read our letter and study that letter and ask themselves, what can they do to help us fix a system of justice that isn't working? Civil and criminal. Engage with us, engage with each other. Lawyers are really, and maybe I'm a little biased, but I think the most thoughtful, educated individuals in the country who understand systems and processes and are logical. And we need you. We need your insights, your thoughtfulness. I would welcome critique, right, on how the system of justice works or doesn't work. And we're in a unique moment right now where we're trying to decide, what does it mean to have remote hearings, remote trials? Do we require all civil trials to be held remotely? I find that really tough to make it mandatory, but nevertheless, you have information and data from your practice areas that could help us better. We need to ensure access to justice. And so your thoughtfulness, the work that you do really matters at the end of the day. So I would say, please stay engaged. The system of justice that you benefit from or your clients benefit from is fragile. So we need you, and we need your help and criticism and support in every single way. That'd be the message that I would want lawyers to know, because I think a lot of lawyers think, I can't do anything. I don't practice criminal law. No, you can help us quite a bit in terms of civil law, as well as your advocacy on behalf of courts around the country. The independence of the judiciary is critical. As some courts get more political, I think you need to demand that we not, that we really become engaged in terms of service, but also maintaining what we believe are certain principles of law.
It has been a real pleasure and an honor to be able to speak with you today, Justice Yu.
Carly, I can't thank you enough for your interest.
These are very important topics, clearly, to our firm and our community and all the folks who have attended this call. And I know that we will continue to have these conversations. And I really thank you for participating.
Thank you.